Hello, I'm Robert McGee. I'm delighted to address you as part of the Third International Congress on Social, Political, and Financial Research. I was graciously invited to participate by Dr. Osman Geyik, and I'm honored to serve as both the honorary chairman and an invited speaker for this event. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to sharing my presentation with you. So let's get started. This research, which I conducted with Dr. Geyik, is about both the attitude toward tax evasion and taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor. There's really two different issues, but they're related issues. And we surveyed the opinion in 5 Euro-Asian countries. And here they are: Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Turkey. And for the methodology, we used the World Values Survey data, which surveyed more than 90 countries, more than 150,000 people in total. And for these 5 countries, it was several thousand altogether, probably more than 6,000 or 8,000 total for all of them. And for the first question that they surveyed, they asked people what they thought about the justifiability of tax evasion, whether it was never justified or always justified. They gave them a scale of 1 to 10, a 10-point Likert scale. And for the other question, again with the 10-point Likert scale, they asked whether taxing the rich or subsidizing the poor would be an integral part of democracy. And the options were 1, it's not an essential characteristic of democracy, or 10, it is an essential characteristic of democracy. And the answers were spread about a bit, but they did favor taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor, which, if you apply just cold hard economic analysis, when you tax someone or penalize someone, you get less of whatever it is that you're taxing or penalizing. And when you subsidize something, you get more of it. So if you actually tax the rich and subsidize the poor, you'll get fewer rich and more poor. I just thought I'd add that because it's cold hard economic analysis. So first, getting back to the first question, how justifiable is tax evasion on a scale of 1 to 10? The 5 countries are ranked. And you'll notice all of the scores are pretty low. They're closer to 1 than they are to 10. Turkey ranked number 1. The sample from Turkey was most opposed to tax evasion with a mean score of 1.69 out of a range of 1 to 10. So they were very strongly opposed to it. And Russia was least opposed, but even there, the mean score was 3.76. which on a scale of 1 to 10 still shows strong opposition. Well, relatively strong. On other studies that have been done of Russia and some of the other former Soviet republics, the people aren't as opposed to tax evasion as people in, let's say, the Scandinavian countries. So in the Scandinavian countries, opposition is strongest usually. And in Russia, it's the least strong among these 5 countries, but it's substantially less than 10, so there still is strong opposition. They don't think it's often justifiable. And we decided to test by gender as well. In prior studies of the relationship between attitude toward tax evasion and gender, there were 2 main patterns. Either women were substantially or significantly more opposed to tax evasion than men, or else men and women were equally opposed. In very few cases were men significantly more opposed. And in the current study, you'll notice that all the p-values are substantially higher than 0.05, which indicates that men and women all had the same opinion about the justifiability of tax evasion. They were equally opposed in all 5 countries. We also tested by age. And in most prior studies, people became more opposed to tax evasion as they got older, or stated differently, older people were more opposed to tax evasion than younger people. And in this study, let's take a look. Azerbaijan went from 3.03 to 3.11 to 280. So actually, the oldest group for Azerbaijan was the group that was most strongly opposed. And for Georgia, 218 to 227 to 222. That was a linear relationship, but you'll notice the p-value there is significantly higher than 0.05, which means that the Georgian group age was not a significant factor. They all thought pretty much the same. And the same with Kazakhstan. There, the p-value is 0.48, which indicates all three groups are equally opposed. And for Russia, big difference there in the p-value. It went from 4.34 to 4.05 to 3.14. So with age, it declined, which means that the older group was significantly more opposed to tax evasion than the other groups. And the older they got, the more opposed they were. In the case of Turkey, the p-value was significantly more than 0.05, which means all age groups thought the same. There was no significant difference. So the main finding was that Russia was a linear relationship, where the older they got, the more opposed they were. And that was true to a lesser extent, but still significant in Azerbaijan. And for the next question, taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor, is it an essential characteristic of democracy or not? And the widespread opinion was that yes, it is an essential characteristic of democracy, because all of the scores are more than 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. And the Russians, again, they ranked 5, which means they were most in favor of the proposition that it was an essential characteristic of democracy. The Georgians had the weakest positive opinion on that. It was still positive because it was greater than 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. But all 5 groups held the position that taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor was an essential characteristic of democracy. And we also tested this one by gender. And you'll notice the only p-values were less than 0.05 were from Georgia and Kazakhstan. In the case of Georgia, the males they had a higher mean score, 5.29 versus 4.94, which indicates that males were significantly more strongly of the view that taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor was an essential characteristic of democracy. And in the case of Kazakhstan, the other case where the p-value was less than 0.05, male was 6.5 and female was 6.89, which indicates that in the case of Kazakhstan, the females were significantly more in agreement with the idea that taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor was an essential characteristic of democracy. And for the other 3 countries, the male and female opinions were not significantly different. And the age factor, again, the scale is 1 to 10. Looking at the p-values, 3 of the 5 countries had p-values that were less than 0.05. So in the case of Georgia, it went from 4.8 to 5.13 to 5.25. So the older the group, the more in favor they were of taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor. In the case of Kazakhstan, it went from 6.73 to 6.5 to 7.03. I might also mention that we didn't do comparisons for all 3 scores. We took the highest and the lowest mean score for each country. So basically it went from, in the case of Kazakhstan, it went from about 6.5 or 6.73 up to 7.03. So the trend, if you can say there's a trend, the oldest group was significantly more opposed or more in favor of taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor than were the 30 to 49 group. Now, in the case for Russia, the mean score there was very close to 0, which means there was a strong difference between the highest and the lowest mean score. The up to 29 group was the lowest of the three, 6.86. Then it went to 7.37, 7.87, which indicates that as the population got older, we had 3 different groups represented. The idea that the rich should be taxed and the poor should be subsidized was even stronger. In the case of the other 3 countries, there was no significant difference between the highest and lowest mean score. They all thought pretty much the same on that issue. The findings then for tax evasion is that opposition to tax evasion was strong, which is the case in most other studies. Turkey was the most opposed to tax evasion. Russia was least opposed. And for gender, there's not a significant demographic factor. In this case, all 5 groups, men and women, had the same basic opinion about the ethics of tax evasion. And for age, opposition to tax evasion increased with age only for Russia. In all the other cases, the opinions were the same. And for taxing the rich, subsidizing the poor, overall, there was strong support for taxing and subsidizing. And as far as gender, the various groups had the same opinion in the case of Azerbaijan, Russia, and Turkey. In the case of Georgia, men showed stronger support than women. And in the case of Kazakhstan, women showed stronger support than men. So if you wanted to do an extra study on that, you could try to find out the answer to that question, why it's sometimes the same and why men are more opposed in some cases and women are more opposed in others. I don't know why that would be. It could have something to do with culture. I don't know. In the case of age, there's not a significant factor for Azerbaijan or Turkey, and support for taxing the rich increased significantly with age for some of the countries, again, but not for others, as I mentioned. So it's interesting, even though they're all partially in Europe and partially in Asia, they sometimes have different opinions on some of these things. And so that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening and watching. If you have any suggestions to make, please let me know, or my co-author, Dr. Geyik, either one. We'll be glad to hear your suggestions. So thank you again, and thanks for participating in this conference. Have a nice day.